We got to talk about this story. All right. We got this story from Reason. This gun shop says it won't do business with Biden voters.
Yeah, in Missouri?
No, in Michigan.
Oh.
Tech companies should have the same freedom to choose their customers. So this is a Michigan-based ammunition shop is refusing to sell to any customer who voted for President Joe Biden in the 2020 election. Quote, we've had a few potential customers call this morning to ask why they have to check a box stating they did not vote for Joe Biden in order to purchase our ammunition. Phoenix Ammunition tweeted yesterday morning. The answer? Joe Biden ran on a campaign built on the most radical gun control platform a major party candidate has ever had, including banning the online sale of ammunition. This, says Phoenix, is essentially a plan to bankrupt our company. That's true. I couldn't believe it when I read that. Joe Biden said, we will ban the online sale of ammo. Why? Like, what's seriously the problem there?
Yep.
That's crazy.
Their whole plan is like, we're going to throw as much sand in the gears of gun ownership as we can.
For what reason?
But also, you have to look at strategically here. This is against the best interest of the United States national security. One of the things that makes America strong is its armed citizenry. When you take away the arms, geopolitically, we become weaker on the world stage.
Well, I mean, like, since when has what's good for the American people stopped Democrat ideology from working?
Well, political ideology. I would say political ideology.
Well, and I want to be fair too. Republican gets excluded from that because Republicans mostly do nothing.
Yeah,
right.
What did Trump do for the Second Amendment?
I mean,
nothing.
Well, no, he did worse. He did bad for it. Banning bump stocks.
I mean, really, the big proposition, the value proposition of Republican governance is that they won't do more bad things. Not that they'll do good things to improve your life, but that they'll just avoid doing the bad things.
But when it comes to Trump and
the
the bump stock ban, he went further than Democrats would have even wished. Democrats usually grandfather in people and their firearms and their accessories. Donald Trump made Americans felons overnight with the signing of a pen, something that, of course, Democrats weren't able to do. Trump did.
I want to read more of this. So there's another quote. They say, in a series of follow-up tweets, the company stressed that it was perfectly willing to give up potential sales to people who voted for Biden. We're dead serious, Phoenix Ammunition tweeted. We don't want your money, and you shouldn't want us to have it because we're going to use it to make more ammo, sell it to the citizenry, and do everything in our power to prevent Joe Biden's administration from usurping the rights of Americans. We have no problem talking to Biden voters and educating them on what they did, but they have to be willing to acknowledge their ignorance at the very least. We are not going to sit here and debate with you. We're a 2A company, and these are our first principles. Phoenix Ammunition's announcement has provoked a wave of positive attention from the right. Many are applauding the company for sticking up for its beliefs and declining to do business with people it sees as a threat to its business model. I love this. Quote, private company, tweeted perennial MAGA gadfly Jack Posobiec. The implication being that because Phoenix is private, it can do it at once. He's right, of course. Phoenix is perfectly within its rights to reject customers who voted for Biden or for any other reason related to a person's politics. Not in D.C., by the way. In D.C., political ideology is a human right. And then they go on to say, I love this, and so is Twitter and YouTube and Facebook and Reddit and so on. Yet when it comes to these private companies rejecting customers based on their ideological beliefs and political statements, Posobiec and many, many others on the right have been whining and objecting nonstop. They insist it violates their rights somehow. They champion proposals to force these private actors to carry speech they disagree with and cater to customer bases they find objectionable. They support federal action to punish private businesses for not being politically neutral. So which is it?
Who wrote this and why are they simping?
Is it Robbie? No, it's Elizabeth Nolan Brown. It's Reason.
Okay,
come on,
it's
Reason. Yeah,
right.
Libertarians.
Yeah.
So they're
they don't get that it's like Jack's joking, right? I mean,
right.
If you actually go to Jack and you say, "Here's the deal: we can regulate private companies and prevent them from discriminating against you politically on Facebook and Twitter, but here's what you have to give up: the random gun shop in Michigan also has to serve Biden voters." He'd be like, "Yeah, I'll take the regulation. Right. Thank you."
He's clearly joking, saying private company is poking fun at all of the people. This is really funny where libertarians break from a lot of conservatives and, on one of these issues, and they're more aligned with liberals on this one. Actually, let me just say, somehow that happened. When did pro-corporate libertarians, I shouldn't say pro-corporate, but pro-private right for companies break from conservatives on that issue and join the liberals?
Well, it's more like
the liberals were always for the regulations.
The liberals realized both the liberals and conservatives actually hold political power at times. The libertarians don't.
Yep.
So that's kind of where you start. And so liberals realized that it assisted them in their attempts to hold and wield political power if they were going to indulge the right of corporations to censor their ideological adversaries. And so liberals who in any other context would never talk about how private companies can do whatever they want, are suddenly saying, oh, actually, Facebook and Twitter are uniquely in the position where they should be given full autonomy. Whereas conservatives are, like me, are also, generally being like, no, generally the free market's a good idea, but I'm sorry, I don't like being discriminated against.
Right. That's the difference between absolute, bottom of the spectrum libertarianism of, free for all essentially, and, well, we need some government, we need some regulations.
Well, I'd love to hear a libertarian explain why, if, given this position that they have of you should never interfere with a private company's right to do what they want, whether or not they could oppose in the 1964 Civil Rights Act and support the repeal of that law.
They do support the repeal of it.
Some do, but many don't, and many certainly aren't willing to talk about it. I mean, I actually did a debate.
Like Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, I did a debate with Robbie Suave on this, and he just dissembled horribly on it. I love Robbie, but he had a rough time when he was talking about the right of Facebook and Twitter to censor people. I'm like, okay, it's do you oppose the 1964 Civil Rights Act? He's like, well, yeah, I do. And I'm like, okay, so you're for hotels and restaurants being able to discriminate against black people. He's like, well, it's just.
This is the craziest thing to me because I've never moved on this position. I've always been in this this was the center left. Pro-regulation when corporations were interfering with the rights of individuals becoming too powerful. That's when the people band together and say, you have too much power and it's causing us harm.
So, interestingly, this is where, the libertarians were educated. I feel like I was educated in this way that was saying, actually, really the problem was government and, all those civil rights, they would have been protected. And the issue was government intervention, and Goldwater was right. The Civil Rights Act went too far. And then, I look back at that, 10 or 12 years ago, Will, and I'm like, that was dumb. Why did I believe that? That was clearly historically wrong and just very, very ideological.
Well, do you know the story behind how this is one of the stories of how we saw the end of segregation was, I think it was Lyndon Johnson. He had some black men who worked for him. And he asked them.
I told you the story.
You told me the story. There you go. Oh, did you write this up for Human Events?
Yeah, I wrote this up.
Tell a story, man, because it's a brilliant story.
So, I mean, this is in Robert Caro's biography, right? But so Lyndon Johnson had these, had black employees, and a couple of them he had drive his car all the way back to Texas from D.C. every year, and there usually wasn't a big deal. But one year he wanted them to take his dog back with him, and they were like, "Please don't make us do that." And Lyndon's like, why? What's the big deal? You have a dog in the car. Who cares? And he's like, do you understand what it's like to drive through the Jim Crow South with a car? We have to drive, 40 miles off the main drag just to find a hotel or a restaurant. Jeez. And many times we just have to sleep in the car. And we have to do that now with a dog too. Are you kidding? And it was sort of that moment that was just crystallized. Wait, we don't have to let that happen. We could, whatever's going on in the South, we don't have to tolerate people not being able to go to a motel or a restaurant on the road and having to go. We just don't have to tolerate that. We can say that that's illegal now. And to me, that's just really powerful of, you can come up with all these, rationalizations and hypotheticals about what would have happened in the absence of some early horrible government intervention, and every bad thing is the fruit of that early government intervention, like libertarians try to argue.
I hear a lot from libertarians that, eventually these businesses would have failed and their competition would have succeeded. I think the key word is eventually. How long would that take?
Maybe.
And I think maybe is the right word.
But here's another point. Put yourself in the position of a restaurateur or a motel owner in the Jim Crow South, just on some random, stretch of highway. Are you making money hand over fist in the 1960s? No, you're not, right? You're a restaurateur in the Jim Crow South in the 1960s. So in the abstract, if some black person came in, even if you had maybe were someone inclined to racism, you might say well, we need the money, so we're perfectly happy to serve you. But the problem was there was this private, this widespread racist disgust among the customer base. And so, if there were so many white customers who were racist and would not stay in a motel that was integrated. And so that private consumer demand for discrimination was sustaining the racism. And there was no, that would have continued. The libertarians are wrong. That would have just continued on.
Right.
And think about how this private discrimination is being used now. It's, again, not the same quality, much worse to be racist, but we see how progressives act today, how they try and use collective pressure to exclude conservatives from public life.
Well,
how does the market solve that?
a really good example that there is a problem of ideology is Gina Carano posts a tweet, Disney fires her, Lucasfilm fires her. So when an individual employee, her as the star of the show The Mandalorian, says something political, the company says, oh, we can't allow that. That's offensive. You're fired. You then have the story of this restaurant where one employee wanted to wear a Black Lives Matter mask. And the business said basically the same thing Disney did. You can't have that. You can't wear it. Sorry. So the activists got the business shut down. It doesn't matter if you're the employer or the employee. When you oppose the cult, they come after you.
That's what I think is funny about this gun shop story is that you have one gun shop who's saying we don't want to do business with Biden voters. Well, how many businesses have turned around and said we don't want to do any business with Trump supporters? Like,
exactly.
Maybe not huge corporations aren't publicly saying that, but I've seen small businesses on Instagram and Facebook posting and saying if you're a Trump supporter, we don't want your money.
That's the funny. There was remember that video where the vape shop guy is screaming at the top of his lungs because the guy's wearing a MAGA hat? Mm-hmm. Like, dude, it's one thing when Phoenix Ammunition is like, hello there, good sir, a Biden voter. I'm sorry, take your business elsewhere. It's another thing when a guy walks in with a MAGA hat and the vape store guy goes, screaming as loud as he can.
It's so mundane. That's where discrimination against conservatives is so mundane that we don't even talk about it. It's not even news.
Right.
It's news when a conservative business discriminates against liberals, not the reverse.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it was meme worthy when the guy was screaming, "Get him back there!" And the guy's like, "I'm wearing a hat, bro. What's wrong with you?"
So does this prove that the government intervention didn't work?
In
our current modern day circumstances?
Well, no, I mean, there's no government prohibition on political discrimination, right? But there is a government prohibition on racial discrimination. And I think, honestly, when you're looking for things like government policies that worked, that ultimately achieved their objective, I think the Civil Rights Act of 1964, you can fairly say achieved its objective. I think it accelerated, it massively accelerated integration in the Jim Crow South and radically transformed
But do you
the country.
think we're regressing, especially with some? I forgot what this picture was from, but there was a mandatory meeting. People of color had to go in one place. White people had to go. Yeah, it was in Seattle.
Seattle
that I saw
Library,
this.
I think.
Do you think we're regressing back into that?
Sure, I think we are. But I think that particular type of discrimination is definitely vulnerable to lawsuits. I think, and Chris Rufo, I don't know if you've had him on yet.
Definitely. Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Chris Rufo is awesome, and I think whenever the left tries to go so far and actually wants to do racial discrimination on its own, it's vulnerable to having the Civil Rights Act brought in to wield against it. The political discrimination problem, on the other hand, like we don't currently have the law. We kind of need, except in maybe a few jurisdictions, I think California and D.C. have some political discrimination protections. But in general, I think like that's got to be a project of the right to say, look, the free market is not going to save us. And I think
it's
bro,
it's not a free market.
The Republicans are not going to do that. Mitch McConnell, his professional, I give him a catchphrase: "Slow down, there, Democrats." That's it. That's what he does.
I mean, he might not do it, but he's old and he may not be in office too much longer. And I think I'm more optimistic on this front because 2 years ago I was saying platform access is a civil right, and people were calling me crazy. Like
they're calling
leftist, they're calling me like Mega Malice did that. I actually
called you a commie.
He didn't call me a commie, but he's like, you're coming from leftist background, and I basically redid his podcast, and it's just everybody's sort of come around to where I was 2 years ago in this radical position.
I had a conversation with a libertarian in Milwaukee at the Mythicist event, and I wasn't there to be at the event. I ended up on a panel because someone wasn't able to make it, but I was in the green room, and there was a bunch of people sitting around talking to this libertarian. And I said, we need regulation of big tech companies in some capacity, be it the ensuring of the freedom of speech because they've taken the commons, or some kind of regulation that says we need to reform of Section 230. And he said, I don't believe you have a right to tell a private institution what they're allowed to do. And I was like, dude, I've heard the argument. I don't care. If you want to sit back while your ideas are completely erased from the public space, by all means do it, because they ain't my ideas. I'm not a libertarian. I'm actually in favor of regulation, and that's what I'm arguing for. So in 5 years, when your political ideology is gone and doesn't exist, who's gonna argue for you?
Well, but also I think we need to make a distinction between private business and also monopolies that control information highways, and also monopolies specifically that are connected to governments in many different ways. So I think there's a difference between the cake owner versus Twitter, Facebook, YouTube.
Oh yeah,
Google.
no, I randomly get questions from people who say things like, well, if you think you should regulate Twitter, how could you possibly oppose regulating the cake owner?
I don't.
I'm like, Well, from my answer to that is, I mean, I think that's a perfectly consistent position to think you should regulate both.
Yeah.
Right. But I think that it's okay for society to impose larger burdens on billion-dollar companies than on small entrepreneurs.
Yep. That's
right. Like it already does that. We do that in insurance. We do that in common carrier. I mean, there's so many different areas of law that treat. Think Obamacare even.
Right.
Small businesses are treated very differently than larger businesses.
So that's one of my first arguments in that when a corporation grows large enough to cause damage to the public, we then come in with regulations. One bakery saying I refuse one thing or another is not causing massive damage to the entirety of the area. However, in my actual position is, look, when it comes to the bakery, what people need to understand, and most people who watch this will probably do, they didn't deny service. They denied a custom message. So the baker basically said you could have any cake that or we can custom make one for you, but we won't write that. And so they sued over it. My position is, I know a lot of people don't like taxes. Libertarians don't like taxes. Taxation is theft. For the time being, if I'm paying taxes to sustain a common area, common infrastructure, pipes, sidewalks, police, fire department, EMS, all of that stuff, and you are using that infrastructure to support your business, that means we are all contributing to the betterment of your business. I believe you have an obligation to reasonably service the public. If someone comes in and is committing crimes, screaming, disruptive, disorderly, threatening, all that stuff, by all means, we kick them out because that's, an affront to everyone in the public. But if we're all contributing to the space to work and live together, and I come into your shop, I understand the argument about the free speech and being forced to write something, and that's a good argument. So I'm kind of on the fence on that one. But overall, I think businesses should provide a equal accommodation to the members of the public.
And I think that's a much closer question than the question of whether or not it's just to regulate Twitter, which I think is very one-sided in favor of, yes, it's perfectly just to regulate them. I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar company that's monopolized a large section of this public square, and that right now people's First Amendment rights aren't really that meaningful. I mean, think about how much Donald Trump has been banned from Twitter for 6 weeks. Think about how much the volume's been turned down on him from losing his Twitter account.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just Twitter. I mean, you can go walk down the street and have a different baker bake a cake, but you could go to Parler. Not anymore. I mean, I guess now they came back, but before you could go to Parler, and then Parler got shut down. And
there's a big difference between private space and government monopolies. That's the thing that we need to really, really, beat into people's heads.
The one of the ways I put it when it comes to social media and why regulation is important is, so like you said, you can go to one baker and he says no. So you walk down the street to another baker. He says yes. There's market competition. You can probably find something. Even if Parler exists, Twitter is basically the LA Coliseum football stadium. The president is in the middle of the field yelling all of his ideas to the people, and they kick you out, and you can walk a few miles away to a small soccer field at a high school where the local principal is giving his ideas. So do you have meaningful access to the president and politicians who are verified using this platform en masse? That Twitter actually gives will put the position they have as a politician under their name. They recognize politicians aren't using a bunch of these other platforms. So the problem I see is, sure, there may be some competition. There may be Parler, there may be Minds. Trump doesn't use any of them. So are you going to be able to hear the president speak? Imagine if, when television was invented, or radio, if the president was going to give an address, they showed up to your house and said, you can't have the radio on to hear the president. And they came in and turned it off on you. I mean, people
you don't have access to CBS or NBC anymore. You can't watch those networks.
They put a giant metal dome over your house. You can't get any radio waves. We've banned you from collecting this information. It's crazy to me that they restrict you from even hearing. Maybe the answer is to ban people from posting, but not from following. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you can make the argument they already do that because you can always lurk on, even if you've been banned from Twitter, you can lurk and read posts.
Why ban you from subscribing to the president's posts because you said something instead of banning your right to say something?
Well, what they did to Trump is they kicked him out of the Coliseum and then burned the soccer field down. I mean, he's banned from Spotify.
Yeah.
What is he going to do? Listen to too much music? He's banned from Pinterest. What is he going to do? Plan a wedding?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
I love when Twitch banned him. Yeah, oh no, the president's going to play Minecraft. And and espouses ideology to kids who are building.
If Twitch were smart, they would have just allowed the president on and like massively built up their platform.
Would have been great, yeah.
You know,
Donald Trump playing Minecraft. What is this green guy doing? Why is he constantly trying to get me? I don't understand. That'd have been hilarious. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you want exclusive members-only content segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.